Hello, my name is Kiefer Starks. I'm here today to talk with you all about the action potential. The action potential is the technical term that describes how neurons in the body use electricity and chemicals to signal other neurons. Learning the action potential is tough for those without previous biological knowledge, but it is summed up very nicely in this presentation. First, it is very important to understand the basic terminology I will use to describe what an action potential is. A neuron is composed of the cell body, where most of its organelles lie, the dendrites, which receive information from other neurons, and the axon, which conducts the action potential to communicate to other neurons. At the end of the axon is the terminal, where neurotransmitters are signaled to release. Neurons are found all over the body, and some axons can be over a meter long. In the cell, the axon has a higher concentration of potassium inside the cell and sodium outside the cell. This is critical to the function of the action potential. Depolarization refers to any time that the charge of the cell moves more positive, while repolarization is the opposite and refers to the cell becoming more negative. Ideally, the cell would like to rest at about minus 70 millivolts. The details of how these charges are established aren't too important. Sometimes the cell exceeds this resting membrane potential in the more negative direction, and this is what is called hyperpolarization. Threshold potential is the voltage in the cell that must be reached for the action potential to fire. Voltage-gated ion channels are the channels that allow the passage of sodium or potassium when an electrical stimulus is detected. Equilibrium potential refers to the charge that both sodium and potassium would like to be at. Because potassium wants to be more negative at minus 90 and sodium wants to be more positive at positive 60, this gradient is what drives the powerful and quick force of the action potential. Threshold potential is usually reached at about minus 55 millivolts, while resting membrane potential is usually held at about minus 65 or minus 70 millivolts. Frequently, action potentials are referred to as all or nothing. This is similar to filling a water balloon. At some point, the balloon can't stretch any further and it breaks. In the sense of an action potential, that metaphorical stretch of the balloon to the point that it breaks is the threshold potential. If a stimulus is inflicted, some of the voltage-gated sodium channels open, allowing some sodium to flow into the cell. If resting membrane potential is brought down to threshold, all of the sodium channels open and sodium floods into the cell. This is the rising phase or depolarization of the action potential. At about positive 30 millivolts, the sodium channels close and the potassium channels open so that potassium can leave the cell and repolarize it. The potassium gates are slow to close, and this is why there is a brief period of hyperpolarization. At this point, a pump will move the sodium back outside the cell and the potassium back into the cell so that another action potential can fire. This occurs all the way down the axon and reaches the terminal, where it then signals release of neurotransmitters to influence another cell. This communication happens all the time. I hope this brief depiction of what an action potential is makes sense. It allows a firm foundation for understanding not only what the process is, but the different things that can go wrong. Thank you all for listening.